the ongoing situation in the north and far north and assure Queenslanders that we are here to make sure that what needs to be delivered will be delivered. And I just want to start by reflecting on some of the situations that still exist. There remains major flood levels at the Herbert, Horton and Upper Burdekin. Some very good news in Townsville with the Ross this morning going from major to moderate. And with that has come a big sigh of relief for the people of Townsville. There is no doubt that the city has dodged a bullet. And if you reflect that nearly 6 years ago to the day, people were picking up the pieces, and to think that in many cases has been spared is certainly a relief. The council will be standing up very, very shortly and explaining to residents about a safe way to return in those black zones today. But I want to thank everybody for heeding the advice and for the way that the community has come together. But we turn our attention further north, and the Bureau will explain that there remains a real risk of potential heavy rain between Yabulu, just north of the city, and indeed to Cardwell. And those communities have well and truly copped the brunt of this disaster. Firstly, to Ingham. The river has started to drop, and with it has come the realisation of how significant this event has been. Growing up there, I remember my parents talking about the 1967 event and how devastating that was, and the fact that we may never see another one again. Well, this event has proven that another one did come, and the river heights were very, very similar to 1967, and the devastation is, quite frankly, incredible. There are people who have been inundated at home, at their businesses and in their farms, and we are here to see that through. Right now, the situation in Ingham is one where our attention is focused on aerial support. So let's get cracking to what that means. There is some form of generation at some of the key assets, and we were able to get the hospital online overnight. There is a handful of key services, a supermarket and a fuel station. But our immediate focus is on airlifting generators, and we're most grateful for the support of the Australian Defence Force to be able to get into there and provide power to some of those critical issues. Things like additional fuel supply, things like the water treatment plant, which is going to be a really, really key part of the recovery. The second element is the substation, and the substation that has been offline is the reason why nearly 7,000 households have been without power and have been for some time. Workers are getting in on the ground to have a look at what the extent of that damage is, and then an assessment will be made about how quickly that can be repaired, or if there needs to be an alternate in that place as well. So there will be a short-term immediate input into those critical assets, but also we have to make sure that we find a way to get the town back online. It's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, and the clean-up's going to be really difficult. And the last thing residents need is an indefinite period without being able to go home and get a good night's sleep. So we'll have more to say about that. I should take the opportunity, though, to thank all of our emergency services personnel, police, fireys, the SES, but also the state agencies. The work of Ergon, we've had less than 10,000 households offline, and in many cases they've reconnected people in Townsville in a really short period of time. We pre-positioned a few hundred people from the south. Their work, in conjunction with a really dedicated local team, has been, quite frankly, incredible. And the job's not done yet. We've still got some people without power in some key locations, but I assure people that that will certainly occur. Garoo, and your local MP's here today as well in the form of Dale Last, remains some water supply issues. There's also some issues around road connectivity. The people of Garoo, they know how to handle floods. This was a big one, and we have to do all we can to make sure that that water supply is there. Likewise in Cardwell, and it's my intention to try to get to Cardwell as soon as I can to see firsthand what has unfolded there. there's quite a number of homes that have been inundated, and a beautiful community that's been severely impacted, and we want them to know that they will not be forgotten. I just want to turn briefly to roads. There are a number of roads that remain out of action, and there's a number of roads that remain covered by water. Unless you absolutely have to be, I would really give the message not to be on the roads. The roads are there for those essential service providers. Now, of course, if you're in an area and you can safely get to and from work, absolutely. But if you're in those key areas where flooding continues, please be careful. I want to make a reflection on the state of the Bruce Highway and redouble our commitment to do something about it. We have worked well in a short period of time to develop the plan that road needs. We have secured a commitment from Canberra of 80-20 funding, which is going to be the injection of cash that's needed. And I can assure you we will use every focus that comes from a disaster to ensure that we don't rebuild the same bit of infrastructure to the same standard at the same location and expect a different result. And we're determined to build betterment into all that we do. Disasters will strike, and communities understand that, but there's no point continuing to do the same thing and expecting a different result. And the damage at Olera Creek provides a big opportunity to do that, and I'll be having more to say. A couple of things now. Re the clean-up. Ultimately, the first thing we want to see is neighbours pitching in and helping neighbours, and we've already had a glimpse of that, both in the rescue effort, but indeed some of the early scenes that are coming from North and Far North Queensland. That's what Queenslanders do, and we'll expect that to continue, no doubt. If you know someone who's vulnerable, who's been hit hard, please pitch in and help them. That would be the best way that we can recover and get back on our feet. Now, of course, help will arrive. And I was just speaking to the SES a moment ago. There's interstate crews who are also looking to mobilise and come here shortly. There are SES crews from throughout Queensland who are here. You've got amazing individual SES teams. They'll be there for you. But ultimately, if you can help a neighbour, that's the best thing possible. There is a hotline, 132 500, if you want to register damage at your place. But as I say, if the Queensland spirit can shine through first and foremost, that'll be excellent. On the health situation, when you're cleaning up, please take all the precautions. We've had the Health Minister on our calls, our disaster calls, to make sure that all the hospitals are there to be able to provide some of the key services for people. We want to make sure that we don't have people going in there because of infections and diseases. It is a dangerous time. To the grants situation, residents would be aware that we have stood up 2 community hubs here in Townsville. Our attention will definitely now focus on the Burdekin, Hinchinbrook and Cassowary Coast, and we will be mobilising there as soon as we possibly can to make sure that there is that one-stop shop for people to be able to get the help they need. The Minister will explain a little more about what the federal government's been doing. And Minister, we really welcome you being on the ground here. We really do, and joining local MP Phil Thompson. We're most grateful for that. Thank you very much. If you need help, you can obviously go into those centres if you're here in Townsville. You can phone 1800 173 349. That's a 24-hour hotline, or you can visit the government's website, which is www.qld.gov.au/disaster help. So that's the Queensland Government's main website with disaster help. Insurance. We have asked the insurers to get in on the ground, and a message to them: thanks for being on the ground, and we want to work with you, and we want you to work with the community. And people have been hit pretty hard, and we don't want them to be put through the ringer a second time. So we'd welcome those payments to flow to impacted people really quickly so they can get back rebuilding their lives. Finally, before I hand over to the Minister, just a message to all of Queensland, and particularly people of this part of the world. You are a very, very resilient group of people, but resilience doesn't mean you should be left on your own, and that's why I'm here, and that's why we're all here. And I can assure you we are going to be here. And I'm here to make sure that the things that are promised to be delivered will be delivered. And I intend to see that through. And I won't be going back to Brisbane until I've had the chance to be on the ground in places like Ingham and Cardwell. And I want this community to know we will keep coming back until the job is done. Over to you, Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. It is great to be here with you. Thank you for your welcome. Thank you also to your team and to Phil Thompson, who's kept me in the loop about what is going on the ground in recent days, and I've really appreciated that, Phil, very much. It has been an incredibly difficult couple of days for people in the north and far north. We understand how significant it is when big events like this happen in communities. We have been determined to work hand in glove with the Queensland Government to make sure that communities here have what they need. As the Premier indicated, this is still a very difficult situation. It is an ongoing emergency. We are not out of the woods yet in many communities. But even while we manage this emergency, our thoughts do need to return to recovery. And so my purpose here in being on the ground, and I'll be here for quite a number of days, is to meet with as many people in community as I can, so that I understand what is required in this continuing situation, but also so that I understand what might be required through the recovery. And I'll add to the Premier's remarks about recovery. Recovery isn't something that starts tomorrow and then ends after a week. For many communities after a big event, it takes a lot to get that community back on its feet financially, psychologically, physically. We are here for the long haul. We've made a number of commitments in recent days to support the Queensland Government. They lead in responding to these circumstances, but we want to be good partners to them. We've been able, of course, we've seen the ADF out on the streets in Townsville supporting the evacuation efforts. In response to a request from Queensland, we have mobilised ADF support, particularly helicopter support. That will be critical, as the Premier has indicated, in resupplying those communities that remain isolated. We have had for a number of days one of the National Aerial Fleet positioned in the north, and they have been tasked to assist by emergency services here in the north. And working with Minister Ley, we've been able to stand up payments and supports to help the community. We have seen the impact of this enormous amount of water in North Queensland and far North Queensland on communities. We've all seen the photos. But what that really means is a personal impact for people in homes and communities who've been affected. And so we've worked really quickly with the Queensland Government to stand up hardship payments. The Premier stepped through how people can access those. We remain ready to work with the Queensland Government as more information emerges about impacts in different communities to deepen and extend that support. Finally, I just want to say this. People have worked together in amazing ways. All of our first responders have been incredible. Our emergency personnel, our energy workers, our comms, telecom workers, our ADF personnel, volunteers, neighbours helping neighbours. Communities have listened to directions that have been provided to them by emergency services personnel. We ask that you continue to do that. There are ongoing risks in this landscape. We are not out of this yet. It is really important that you listen to advice, that you keep yourself safe, and we all get through this together. Thank you.
So we've had the situation over the past few days where several locations between Tully and Ayr have experienced more than a metre of rainfall. Several locations within that area have also recorded new records. That situation has now eased overnight and this morning. We're seeing a general easing in conditions and the widespread rainfall that's leading to life-threatening and evacuations is now much more unlikely. We do still have a severe weather warning that extends from Yabulu to Cardwell. That's where we expect to see some of the heavier totals today. Townsville has been removed from that warning area, but we do have a chance of severe thunderstorms, and that really extends across a broad area from Proserpine to Port Douglas and as far west as Croydon and Julia Creek. So that's something that we encourage the community to keep an eye on, those warnings as they are issued. We can still see some localised heavy rainfall with thunderstorm activity, We don't expect that to exacerbate the situation, no. We still have major flood warnings issued for the Herbert, the Upper Burdekin and the Horton River. We are seeing some of those river systems trending down. Any additional rainfall over the coming days is likely to keep that steady, but not likely to exacerbate the situation, but we'll certainly see those warnings in place for days to come. By no means is it going to be a dry week ahead. It'll still be shower and thunderstorm activity around the district, and we encourage the community to continue to keep an eye on the warnings as they are issued. All good?
Good morning. Can I just start with a thank you to the community, to all of the community in North Queensland for responding, listening to the messaging, and in particular to those citizens that have jumped out and helped their fellows in time of need. That's been fantastic. I'll also note that all levels of our response from local to district to state and federal is working very well together, and that the overall coordination has been excellent. Shortly I'll invite Chief Superintendent Graham Payne, the District Disaster Coordinator for Townsville, up to talk about some more specific issues around what's happening here on the ground and in Ingham in particular. But just to note that our planning is well advanced in the police and emergency services and SES as part of the Queensland Police now, but I'm also aware in Queensland Fire Department and other emergency services to continue our commitment in the response phase, which is not over yet, but also looking in that relief and recovery phase, looking for 3+ weeks of recovery where we need to keep additional resources on the ground and make sure that we're ready to help our community when they need it. Also, we're very mindful that Queensland has been known to throw up subsequent events, so we're planning around what might come next and can we sustain these operations for the coming months, and I'm very confident we can. Obviously, we have a focus in policing on anti-looting. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to push resources where they need. I'm very pleased to say we've seen minimal offending. In fact, offending overall in Townsville is down over the last week. Not surprising, but we want to keep it that way. And only one reported looting offence that we would call in that case, and a couple of other incidences that have happened in our response that have been dealt with very well by our local police. I'm going to finish off by just reminding everyone that as we come out of recovery, it's not just back to normal. As the water goes down, we know that the roads can be damaged, we know that it can be dangerous environments. All of our community have to be aware around road safety. We don't want to lose people on the road unnecessarily because the conditions are bad, and also they could be walking into really risky environments. They need to be careful about that. With that, I'll hand over to the Chief Superintendent. Thanks, Graham.
Yeah, good morning. From a district disaster perspective, I just want to reiterate the message of the Commissioner and thank the local communities for their cooperation. We've still got a lot of people that are displaced from their homes and from their families. We've still got a number of isolated communities. I want to thank the community for their cooperation as we've worked through the evacuation processes, and we're now going to try and support and work with the councils and look at the modelling to try and return people to their homes when it's safe to do so. I just want to touch on the weather at the moment. It's very common in weather systems to see breaks in the weather. We can see that now. It's often associated with some riskier decision making by people. I just want to reiterate, please listen to the messaging because the weather will change frequently. The river heights are impacted by flows that often are far away from the metropolitan areas. So please listen to the advice. If you see a break in the weather, it doesn't mean that it's clear to go home. It means that it's how the systems operate, but there are impacts that happen which will be indirect and far away, which can impact on your safety. Locally, I just want to acknowledge the work of the local disaster management groups and all the stakeholders that are operating in that. We've got people that are working in extraordinarily difficult conditions. Locally, we've door-knocked over 5,000 properties here to work to try and keep the community safe. The responsiveness from the community has been fantastic. Those door knocks are undertaken in extraordinarily challenging conditions, both from a wind and a weather perspective. I want to thank the workers. We've got people that are sleeping at work to try and be as responsive as they can be to what's happening. So I really want to thank our workers, and I know that that work is going to continue as we continue to move into the next stages of our operation. From a local perspective, we have a lot of work underway in Ingham today. There's been ongoing planning with the ADF at a very detailed level and to local councils to identify what the priority needs of the communities are. Today is the day where we have planned uplifts from the ADF to bring what's required into the community. That will continue over the coming days, and we'll continue to work through with the community to find out what they need. In terms of Palm Island had a landslip that impacted their power on Sunday. I want to thank the work of Ergon, the utility providers and the barges. That has been addressed yesterday. They have water treatment issues today, which we're working through, and we're hoping to resolve those shortly. We've seen, obviously, a visible break in the weather at Townsville at the moment. The peak of the black zone is predicted to be occurring around now. I urge the community now, please listen to the messages that are going to come from Council, because it may not be everyone can return. It may be an incremental return, if it is, based on the river heights across the next few days. We continue to monitor the Burdekin, particularly at Selheim and Inkerman, to determine what the river flows are going to look like and any potential impacts on the community there. And we're also working with Charters Towers Local Council around the water treatment issues that they've got in their area. So there's a lot happening. We are right in the middle of that resupply. We are really trying to be as responsive to community needs as we can. At a local level, we've stood up our recovery groups, and we will now start to focus on that formal recovery element now, which will incorporate a broad range of support to the community moving forward, and we anticipate that occurring across the coming weeks.
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Superintendent. And I just want to echo the words of the Premier early, and as we just heard from the local superintendent about police officers and emergency service personnel sleeping on the floor and working around the clock. And I want to assure all locals across North Queensland that we have more police on the ground than possibly ever before. We have almost 600 police working across the region, assisted by about 140 police who have been deployed from other areas, coupled with hundreds of SES volunteers. And as we heard earlier, there are hundreds more on the way, not only from down south, but from interstate. And I want to put on the record our thank you to every single one of our first responders who have been working around the clock, not just responding to this event over the weekend, but in preparation to this event in the weeks leading up to it. And they will continue to work around the clock to help the communities rebuild and recover as we move forward. I want to let the community know that we are here for the long haul, and we will stay as long as is required. To that point, I equally want to thank the community. As the Superintendent just pointed out, our police and SES volunteers have knocked on almost 5,000 doors, and those conversations aren't necessarily always nice conversations, asking someone to grab their family, their kids and their pets and encouraging them to leave. But the community has embraced our frontline services. They have heeded the warnings, and I just encourage them to continue to do so and thank them in advance for the further work that needs to be done.
Thanks very much, everybody. Absolutely, as soon as I possibly can get there. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, it's something that's important. I also want to get to Cardwell and in time to Garoo as well. So yeah, very much so. Yeah. Well, at the moment, Townsville, you can't go north, south, or west, and east is always difficult. And in the case of Ingham, it's I had to look at that image from Olera Creek. I had to look at it 2 or 3 times. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it shows you that you've got so many hundreds of thousands of people at the mercy of one road, and that road isn't up to standard. And we wouldn't cop it anywhere else in Australia, but somehow we cop it in Queensland. You know, you won't find another road where over 40 people died in a year. You won't find another road that has so many pinch points. And events like this highlight how much the most decentralised state in the country is exposed to it. And something has to be done. And that the images from Olera Creek are a living, breathing example of why we have to do so much better. It's a great question. They're throwing everything at it. They've gone and they've surveyed it from the sky, and the moment the water recedes, they're going to look at every option. So there's 2 elements. The first is the temporary option. We've got to find a way to connect at the very least the services, and then there's the long term. And my preference is the rebuild be done parallel to a higher standard and build in flood immunity there, and it'll be just another little tick on the road to trying to improve that Bruce Highway. There are so many pinch points, and we've got to systematically work through them. And for the first time in a generation, we're working on a plan that can deliver the road that regional Queenslanders need. Yeah, yeah, and that's why the support of the Commonwealth is so important, and that's why the fact that here we're a garrison city in Townsville, but across the board, to have the assets of the Defence Force will make all the difference. So the community needs to be resupplied. The first priority has got to be that generation, because people need to get reconnected. We need to get power back on. And in terms of food, there's one of the supermarkets is back online. The other is, in terms of power generation, the other we need to get temporary generation to them. But the supermarket said they did pre-position some stock in different warehouses to bring in as well. All of those challenges lie ahead, but rest assured we need to also go via air on so many different things.
As conditions ease, how's it going to look for people who have lost their homes, they don't have insurance? Specifically in Bluewater, I went up there, their homes are completely inundated. What's the support that's going to be available for them completely lost?
Everything that people need, we're going to be there to help them through. And there'll be everything from financial assistance to mental health support as well. During a disaster, all of that matters, as it does for the emergency services personnel. So, in the case of the SES, the tragedy in Ingham, that is obviously horrendous for the family, but it's also really difficult for the emergency services volunteers as well. So we'll be there for the long haul, and we're willing to help people. There are people who either won't have been able to afford insurance. There are many businesses who just quite simply could not get it. It wasn't available to them, and I've spoken to people who are in that situation. And it's going to be really, really difficult, which is why we have to do all we can to help them get back on their feet.
Yesterday it was indicated that you'd be requesting, or the state government would be requesting help from other states. Do you have any information about how many people, where they might? The call to action has been received remarkably well, and I envisage that we'll have support from interstate by the end of the week. Obviously, the road situation makes it really, really difficult, but they are at the ready, and what they will do is provide a break. In the last little while since I've been here, I've just looked into the eyes of some of the people, whether they're in the headquarters here or police at the front line, or the fireys or the SES or the AMBOs, and you can tell they're getting tired. They've worked pretty hard, and they do need the backup as well, and the opportunity to say thank you to them means a lot. They've got families too. I've been with SES volunteers in my time as disaster minister who've been there helping others, and their home's been inundated, so it's pretty tough. Ingham remains the biggest challenge. So there's less than 10,000 homes without power across the board. Nearly 7,000 of those are in Ingham. Now, there's also the second complexity, and that is a number of people who have generators will be running low on fuel as well. So that's in parallel. But just to reiterate our strategy, first and foremost, it's to urgently get generators in there to get those key assets back online, particularly food and fuel, and then we have to make sure that substation gets back online. Now, whether or not that's an urgent repair of it, if that's possible, or if it's somehow getting in an alternate substation capacity, and that's not without challenge. But one way or another, we just can't let that community fend to their own devices, and we won't.
Do we have a figure at this stage of the number of homes?
No, but the opportunity to get on the ground will be very important for that. Amazing, isn't it? Look, the rainfall figures for Rolling Stone and Paluma, they were big. When you talk a metre of rain in 2 days, that's 2 years in some other parts of the country. So I understand there's a lot of rain, but it also exposes why we need a level of betterment and resilience in our infrastructure. Queensland's at the mercy of that road, but we also have our fair share of what Mother Nature throws at us, and it's important that roads like that are strengthened. Well, the inland freight route has been a key for a long time, but there are missing parts of it. The answer is yes, I want to pursue that, and today's not the day for me to point to the fact that it was promised to be done a long time ago. Today's the day to get back on our feet.
Just on another matter of the tragedy.
Is there anything else on this before? Because I do want to get onto that. So it's okay.
In terms of Townsville, are we out of the woods?
It's looking really positive, really positive. For the Ross to be downgraded from major to moderate this morning, that's a really good sign. Now, Council will be addressing the community very soon about a safe return to those areas. Today, things are looking really good.
And just back to Ian, in terms of the plan with the ADF, do you know how many personnel are going up there?
Well, firstly, it's the aerial resources that's most important, and that's why I'm really delighted the Minister's here. The ability to use the Chinooks to be able to get those generators in, that's huge. Of course, defence is part of the community. Exhibit A. Defence is part of this community, and they'll be there helping clean up. Of course they will. But first and foremost, I just, it'd be great to see more of what has already unfolded with people getting in and helping the vulnerable. That's first and foremost what we want to see. The SES will be there, Defence will be there, the community at large will be there, but so too must the community. And I've known enough about this place to know the kind of people who live here.
Ask in terms of those ones, sorry.
Yeah.
In terms of the health briefs,
Yeah.
have you been briefed any further from the Minister about these
Only to say that it provides a real risk, and by all means, hook in and work hard, but do it with shoes and gloves and do all you can to stay safe. Thanks.
shark attack? First of all, do you have a message to the island?
Oh, just how incredibly sad we are for that community. That is a very special part of the state, and it's a very tight-knit community. And to think that a young girl with all to live in her life, doing what she loves, could have her life taken away is really troubling. And we are incredibly sorry to that family, and we are incredibly sad for their loss.
Second fatal shark attack in the state. We're still waiting on a report
Yeah.
into shark attacks.
Yeah.
KPMG. When is that going to be released?
The Fisheries Minister will obviously consider that report, but let's put the report to a side for today, and let's today reflect on the loss of a life and how incredibly sad that is for the community. I won't go too much further, but I will make this point. People have to come first. The safety of humans always have to come before the welfare of a shark. And I'm incredibly sad what's happened. And we'll make sure to the community that they'll get the support they need. But first and foremost, everything we do has to be about trying to keep people safe when they're in the water.
Do you think this is a sign that the guidelines
No, but I'm not going to get into there today other than to redouble our efforts to keep people safe when they're at beaches. Well, the Minister will evaluate that as part of this report, and the coroner will obviously also make a contribution. But I was asked about my view about the management program, and first and foremost, we have to do everything we can to keep people safe, and that's a non-negotiable for me. Yeah.
a lot of police will be flown up to assist what police are over time. Are they going to be sent to him at some stage? Or what's
Yeah, Shayla, very good point. We've got a lot of police here, and we are mobilising a lot of assets. We've heard about the ADF and heavy lift helicopters, etc. And we've got police and SES and fire department ergon workers on standby, and we're going to be heavy lifting them in as quickly as we can to support the ones in number that are already on the ground. I think the Superintendent's probably got more specific details about the allocation of resources, or the Commissioner.
Yes, sir, what was the question? Yeah, look, we've had surge resources being put into Townsville, which we've been staging to either deploy north to Ingham, south of the Burdekin, or west as required. What we did in our planning phase in the lead up to the weather event was pre-deploy a significant number of police into Ingham and to Halifax as well. We obviously work with our fire department and SES colleagues to make sure that we also surged swiftwater rescue and flood boats. So we've got enhanced capability on the ground in Ingham already. In addition to water police, we pre-deployed water police into Ingham as well. So those resources have been used over the last few days to conduct rescues and assist the public. So we have surge capacity in Ingham at the moment, and we have very significant surge capacity in Townsville. The recovery and also the resupply plan is focused around our capacity to get those resources into the community. So we've been working with the ADF around that to prioritise what flights and what we can put on those flights to get in and best support the needs of the community.
Thank you.